10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Good luck, studio.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Paul Chandler, the Shy Yeti. He's not that shy.
Oh, it's the Shy Life Podcast.
All I wanted was a pie, and then I hatched out of an egg.
Okay, bring the mic over. He's ready to record.
It's the quiet ones you've got to watch, you know.
Is it metaphorical? Is it deep? Is it deep?
Good boy. He's not all that shy, is that right?
Blimey, Governor. It's the Shy Life Podcast.
Excellent.
511.
Hello, campers. How are you?
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Shy Life Podcast with me, Paul the Shy Yeti. How are you doing? I'm good. And you? Great. So what's going on this episode? Well, I'm here with Nick Goodman.
Yeah.
And, well, it's not exactly a sequel to our book club episodes, but I guess it's a companion piece. But, let's run the theme music, and when we come back, I'll explain to you exactly what we'll be doing this episode. Run that theme music.
Darling, it's the Shy Life Podcast.
Good, but it's positive thinking. The highlight, the Shy Life.
You won't find a cast of characters like this everywhere.
Hello, Paul.
You don't want 4 nuts, do you?
I'll go anywhere for a potato.
Delicious. This particular episode of the Shy Life is a little more abstract than usual.
Go Shy Yeti.
Oh, I hope he hasn't found out my secret. I think he has.
If you thought that was bad, just listen to this.
Oh, I can't wait for it to begin.
It's the Shy Life Podcast.
So we did be sidetracked.
Yeah, I'm strangely drawn to Yeti Uncle John's ankles as well.
But has the Shy Life Podcast slowed down? I don't think so.
It's all gooey and easy. Yum, 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 yum.
And we're back. So, yes, I had an idea for this episode, Nick, just this morning. We're sitting in your spare room. Yeah. Is that what you call it? Your
spare room, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's a non-TV sort of hangout books. Yeah. Books, DVDs and records.
Yeah, it's also when we've done the live, most of the live episodes that we've done for Pride 48 have been done in this room as well.
And also a lot of when we were Skype podding during lockdown, all of that was, I think pretty well all of that was from here.
Also, it's fitting. Now, I was thinking, as somebody who stayed in this room a lot and has stayed in your spare rooms all over the years, you have a lot of interesting books.
Oh, thank you.
And I don't think that we've discussed a lot of the ones that I'm looking at right now. But I thought that we'd have a sort of a little book club, or just go through some of the books that you have kept in this room, and you can tell us sort of a little bit about them. Sure. Now let me see. I see you've got the Richard Burton diaries. I've got. I went through a stage of buying. I've got some Richard Burton books and biographies, and also some Liz Taylor ones. I don't know. I'm mainly interested in Richard Burton because he was born. Well, we have the same birthday. That's right. Not birth date, but we're both November the 10th people. I'm not sure.
He was born the same year as my dad, 1925, and obviously, he didn't last quite as long as my dad, but. That was very much Ali, because obviously there's a mixture of mine and Ali's stuff.
Yes,
that was very much Ali's intention to get it. But I would like to settle. I haven't read it yet, but I'd like to settle down and read it, because he was a very interesting, complicated man. Yeah, and of course, with his on-off legendary relationship with Liz Taylor. It's nice. It's like Kenneth Williams. It's nice to get into the mind of someone that complicated. And
yeah, I'm not sure if I have. I think in a way I'd be quite interested, because I do like diaries, and I think maybe the books I've got are more biographies So rather than diaries, I think the diaries would be interesting. I'll have to make sure. So again, I buy a lot of books, but don't necessarily get round to reading them for years later. But you've got quite a lot of sort of biographies on that top shelf.
I do. To an extent, I always try and group together subject, but because books come in so many shapes and sizes, it's very, very difficult to do that. So you kind of I'm trying to get plays, religious literature, and kind of classic literature like the Time Machine and Lord of the Flies and things like that, and plays.
Some of the plays. Is that an Alan Bennett I see there?
Oh, it's an Alan Bennett, History Boys. History Boys. I was given that. I think it might have been my alley. I'm trying to think why. I think maybe I don't know if it was somebody in it that we knew or something, but that was interesting. And I've read it.
Yeah,
and it's a very good play. And it's.
I've read some of his diaries. His diaries are interesting.
Yeah,
and fun to read. Interesting.
Intelligent man, very gentle man, and of course very prolific.
You also got John Mills, which I don't.
Again, that's Ali. I'm quite interested in him, but I'm not quite as interested in him as Ali is. But that's. We've got two John Mills books actually. We've got in the other room because we've got more books in our bedroom, and we've got a book of John Mills. He's a very prolific photographer, and he did loads of there's all sorts of famous people, including there's because they were doing some swimming in their one of the digs, and you've got Laurence Olivier's bum, one of the photographs. That's again interesting man. I quite like his stuff. Ali's more into the old films, like the black and white war films and things like that. I'm not really my cup of tea, but that's an Ali.
What about Arthur Lowe, best known for being in Dad's Army?
I can't remember whether I gave that to Ali or Ali gave that to me, but I have read it, and it's very good.
Is that a biography?
It's a biography by his son.
Oh, right.
And it starts with, funnily enough, it starts with his death, because he kind of, where he was and his reaction to when it was announced that Arthur Lowe died, and he kind of like I think he was a long-distance truck driver at the time, and he heard on the radio, Arthur Lowe's died. Oh, right, that's a shame. Hang on, that's my dad. And it's a delightful book, and it's a nice portrait of the Dad's Army team. I have another Dad's Army book down there, but we'll come to that later. But yes, it's got some wonderful quotes in it, especially from John Laurie, who sort of felt that Arthur Lowe rather prostituted himself in his career. The man's got no dignity. Give him £1,000 and he'll get into a monkey suit.
Now, you got Joan Sims. Is that an autobiography?
That is an autobiography.
I feel like I've got that myself.
Joni, but it belongs to Ali. Although I quite like Joan Sims. I when she comes in on guest appearances on shows, I always knew, it's going to be good.
Just in case, maybe our American listeners, Joan Sims was one of the Carry On team as well as being on lots of other things. But,
one of the things she was in 1986 was Doctor Who.
Yes,
and as a Doctor Who fan, I suppose I haven't actually read the full book, but I'm going to flip forward to 1986, and I was very disappointed to learn that she didn't really enjoy it, which is a shame, because there's other stories about when she was in it that Colin Baker was saying they had a pretty eating competition and they had lots of fun. It sounded like lots of fun, and it's a pity she couldn't mention the fun as well. The fact that she didn't understand it. I'm not judging.
I recently read Stephanie Beacham's autobiography, and although she's quite a spiritual person, but not necessarily in a traditional going to church way. Lots of different things, and so you're interested in all the anecdotes, and then it kind of goes into a couple of chapters of that which I'm not quite so sure about. Yeah. But I was trying to find some horror films she was in the early 70s by a British director, and I thought she had, flicking through it, I thought she hadn't discussed them. And obviously I was interested in what she might say about being in Dynasty and the Colbys. Yeah. But it turns out she did mention that film director, but the autobiography just wasn't in 100% chronological order. No. It did get mentioned, and it sounds like she did quite enjoy
one. I suppose also that there's one book that I used to have and gave away, which is Bruce Purchas's autobiography, who played a sort of blustering villainous character in Doctor Who, the Captain, and he is, as far as I'm aware, best known as the Captain, and apart from a photograph, he doesn't even mention it, and it just is theatre work, which is good. But the other book I gave away that I was given for one birthday was Stephen Burkoff's autobiography, and it was just so pretentious and boring that I just sorry, Stephen.
Although I'm a fan of the Kinks, I never read Ray Davies's autobiography because I think he writes it almost like a fictional novel where
he does. I mean,
where it's a character. And
Stephen Burkoff called himself the actor in it, and he doesn't sort of mention anybody by name, which makes a very boring book. And he just invented rehearsals and shagging people, but he doesn't mention them. And kind of, I thought, oh, come on, you know, if you're going to write a book, write a book. You know, just go for it. Probably the most disappointing autobiography I've ever read.
I see you've got Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Is that is that yours? Is that Annie's?
It is mine. Yes.
Is it because it's time travel, or is it because it's H.G. Wells?
I think it's a bit of both, actually. I think because I bought that in 1986 whilst I was unconscious. What was it? Unemployed. Time Machine.
Not because of Time Lash.
Well, possibly, but more to the fact that I was about to write a Magnet Editor story called The Time Trigger, which was all about various theories about time travel and its practical application. And it was probably the most difficult story I had to do that year, and I kind of wanted to get back to basics as to how people really peel it back and see how people think that time travel could actually physically happen. So I think it was that, and I suppose Time Lash, because somebody mentioned on one of the Sonic Waves, that's the tape scenes, that about there were real parallels to the Time Machine and Time Lash. So I thought I'd give it a whirl. And I've always rather liked the cover, which is quite nicely done and quite.
For the listeners not in the know, Time Lash is slightly, vaguely controversial Doctor Who story in that it isn't meant to be that good. But it actually has H.G. Wells as a character who travels on the TARDIS at one point in the story and is heavily involved in the story. I
did read it and I quite liked it. I thought it. Of course, he goes into the future because H.G. Wells always thought in terms of the future. I actually thought it would have been more interesting if he'd gone into the past, because that would have given us a reference point that we knew about.
H.G. Wells has a lot of connections with Woking, near where I live, in that I think he was writing The Invisible Man and War of the Worlds whilst he was living in that area. I don't know if he wrote any other ones, but those are the ones that are particularly... There's an Invisible Man sort of... I know it sounds strange. There's an Invisible Man sort of statue in one of the pubs, but it's like when he went into it. But it's sort of like when he was wrapped in bandages, so that it's a kind of it's sort of you can see that there's nobody inside, or it looks like there's nobody inside the bandages.
I have elsewhere. I have two versions on DVD of the Invisible. I've got the David McCullum American Adventure series, and I've also got the BBC One classic adaptation from 1984.
Poppy was talking about the 1950s version with Debbie Watling on a show not so long ago.
But with I think Time Machine and Invisible Man rather than War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds I've not read, but obviously I've read an adaptation of it and I'm familiar with the story. I think maybe Martian Invasions of Earth is something that's just been done to death a little bit too much since. Obviously, it must have been a complete novelty when the book came out. But I'm not so much interested in the story.
Horsell Common, which I think features in that name, is one of the crash points of the Martians, is the common that's on the outskirts of Woking. So I did quite a lot of Sutton Park on Horsell Common.
But also, Invisible Man is a very personal journey and an interesting concept. and the fact that the lead character isn't actually all that nice. And the Time Machine, the whole mechanics and philosophy of going through time was an interesting one. Also, I suppose that explains also why Time After Time, which has Malcolm McDowell's H.G. Wells, is one of my favourite films, because it's a lovely concept, and he makes a very vulnerable hero.
You also have a copy of William Golding's Lord of the Flies, which I did at school, but also has a lot of connections with Salisbury because William Golding was a teacher here.
Yes, and he was a teacher at Bishop's.
He was a teacher at Bishop's, yes.
Now, I think this...
Oh, that's the version I had with that.
Yes,
that's
with the crying
with
pig.
The pig.
Now, I'm just having a little look here, because I did Lord of the Flies in 1984 with school.
Yeah.
Looking at this copy, I don't think... What was that, 83? It's the same version that I had at school, but I don't think... Oh, gosh, this is going back a bit. I don't think it's the book, because... When we had the book, it was, we'd scribble in it and we put notes and everything. But I remember finding it a very, very interesting book, and it did inspire a Magnus Editor story.
I've seen, and there was that film version from the 60s. That's quite. Although I'm sure there's other versions since.
It's a frightening concept, and various sort of genres have dug into it, like Children of the Corn, the Stephen King horror story. There's an episode of the 70s series, The Survivors, which goes similarly along those lines.
But I guess for those who don't know, I'm not going to give a long synopsis, but Lord of the Flies is about a load of schoolboys. It is just boys, isn't it? On an island. I can't remember how they get there. Is it plane or boat?
I think the plane crashes, and they're the only survivors.
Yeah.
I think they're all school kids.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a survival of the fittest, really.
Yes,
they suddenly become they have to become the grown-ups. They become the government.
Now,
and everything they try, democracy as anybody that picks up a conch is able to speak. And in the end, the conch gets broken, and I think. There's a fat kid that's always picked on.
Don't give too many spoilers.
I'm telling you the plot. Go and see it. It's all done in the best possible.
And the funny thing is, and I don't know whether this was a true story, and I may have even mentioned it in some other context, but my English teacher, Mr. Reggiani, at Chaffin Grove, the private school I went to for 2 years before I went to the grammar school, I don't know if that's when we did Lord of the Flies, but he certainly mentioned that he was at Bishop's when William Golding was his English teacher, and he also maintained that he was in the class that was left to... that William Golding left his English class one day and kind of secretly watched as in the same way as the boys are left on the island and things start breaking out and different factions. He did that. Mr. Reggiani claimed that he was one of the schoolboys that inspired William Golding to write Lord of the Flies. Now, who knows? I mean, he probably would have been the right age. That was not impossible, but
marvellous.
But whether it was just a bit of a good story to tell some schoolboys, I don't know. But
can I just quickly point out we've got the complete dramatic works of Samuel Beckett. I'm quite I wouldn't say I was a knowledgeable fan, but I do like his work. It's very mysterious and minimal, and I saw a Beckett play for the first time when I went to watch something else at the college group when I went back to college in '96, and there was a play called Play, which is basically three people who have died. And they're in sort of either hell or purgatory or so. And it was so haunting and interesting. It's stuck with me ever since, and I wanted to see more Beckett. It's Beckett is very controversial because he's just very, very weird. But I like him very much. And I have to say, my mum appeared on the quiz show Eggheads in 2006, and I was very proud of her being on it. But I kind of buried my head in my hands when the question that knocked her team out was one on Beckett, And I think it was a play of his called Happy Days, written by Beckett. And she said, I wouldn't have thought so. He wasn't very happy. But I thought, no, mother, no, don't get a question wrong on Beckett. But I'm actually preparing a sketch of a Tom and Jerry episode in the style of Beckett, where because he's very nihilistic and very sort of grim. And I have this idea for a thing where Tom eats Jerry in the first 30 seconds of the first cartoon, and realises he's just jeopardised his whole career because he's got nothing to chase, and he kind of goes around with this mouse tail in his mouth, and I must to get the feel of it. I must read Beckett, but it's just anyway.
On the second shelf down there. You've got The Complete Goodies, which is all about the TV show The Goodies.
Yes, this is a book I've had my eye on for some time, but the acquisition of it is rather tragic, because this book used to belong to my friend David Hamilton, who the mutual friend with my friend Alan. The lovely, lovely guy, and very friendly and scholarly, and when his stuff was gone through, a lot of the television, classic television fans like myself were kind of approached by Alan and say, this is up for grabs, do you want it? And this was one of many that I actually lay nabs on, because The Goodies was my first favourite programme when I was a kid. And interestingly enough, and I've only recently realised this, the guy that wrote it, Robert Ross, we, that is to say Ali and myself, watch a lot of Talking Pictures TV, and this guy is the main interviewer for the famous people. And for Christmas this year, Christmas just gone, I bought Ali a whole box set of interviews that Robert Ross did with some famous people, Liz Fraser, Fraser Hines? No, not Fraser Hines. George Layton, a lot of film stars as well, including Michael Craig, so that's a name I probably didn't know last year, but do know now. So, but yeah, it's got a complete episode guide to The Goodies.
And the book next to it, Prophets of Doom, that's a book all about the TV show Doomwatch from the early 70s. Is that a favourite?
It is, yeah. It was written by Michael Seeley, who he's known to us. I think he's worked on Around the Archive, Tropy and Leicester, and he was a pen friend of mine in the early 90s. And I have to say, he must have been getting to Doomwatch the same time as I did, because he used to supply me with some copies. But you didn't hear that from me. There was a previous version of this from 10 years ago, and this is the expanded version with some other people from the production team tracked down and interviewed. And there was enough expansion for me to say, yeah, I'd like the expanded copy. And it's also a larger book than before and in bigger print. And someone like me who's getting on a bit and his eyesight's not quite as good as it used to be. But I have read that book from cover to cover several times, and Phil Ware, who's also as sort of credited to this one, does an amazing, no stone unturned, which is just what I like. So yeah, it is a favourite. Yeah.
What's the book next to it? I can see a signed, but I can't see what it's about.
That's a signed unofficial guide to Sapphire and Steel.
Oh.
Now I'm a big fan of Sapphire and Steel, and I think it's been rather underrepresented, and the production side of it, which I'm always interested in, I've never read much about, so I was drawn to this book because of that, and I don't think it disappointed, actually. It's very well written by Richard Callaghan. Now, if he's out there, hello, but I have a feeling, because I used to run the Doctor Who, as you know, listeners know, I used to run a Doctor Who tape magazine, Rayface Shift, and I have a feeling that Richard Callaghan was a customer of mine at one point. I think he got some RPSs back in the day, but yeah, he does a good job, and you learn much about the production and the writing. And
I'll have to have a look at. I don't think I've seen that you had that before.
It's nice. It's good. I like to know all the sort of anal retentive facts, like when things were made and how they were made.
And again, for those who don't know, Sapphire and Steel starred Joanna Lumley, better known, well, potentially better known these days for Absolutely Fabulous or The New Avengers, and David McCallum was Steel, best known for what's it called? Man from Uncle, really, yeah.
And also he's
lots of things.
To this day, he's a hard-working.
He's probably best known for that crime show.
That's right.
Diagnostic show. Is he in one of the CSI ones? Or whether he still is, I'm not sure.
But I mean, he's 90 next year, and he's incredible. He just goes on and on. He doesn't age all that much.
Yeah. Now, next to that, what's the Limbo Connection? Is that
Limbo Connection is that's the original book of what became the 6 armchair thriller in Series 1. It finished off Series 1, written by Derry Quinn, who was a writer that came quite late to novels. I think he was a scriptwriter before then. I could have got that wrong, but with Armchair Thriller is one of my favourite shows ever, and it was a mixture of original scripts and adapted books. So when I started getting the DVDs and started rewatching it, I was keen to track down the original books in the case where the original books have been. So Limbo Connection, it's fairly close to the book. There was one book I haven't got anymore of, which is his second story, Fear of God, which is in the second season, and that's very different from the televersion. And I think the televersion is a lot better. It's a lot tighter. It's a lot more exciting, and there's half the book has the lead character, the journalist, trailing around London, just getting one little obscure cue after another. Whereas there's lots more tension in the. It's tightened up right, and then the end is completely different. But anyway, Limbo Connection is nice. It's about a geriatric home that is experimenting with kind of. Well, I won't give too much away, but it's up to no good. And James Bolam was and Rosalind Ayres were the leads in that story. And I saw it when you went after.
You've got. There's a book called Callan Under the Red Sky. Is that about Callan or novelisation?
Callan, yes. No, it's an overview of the series. Written by a man I admire very much, Andrew Pixley, who is probably best known for his Doctor Who publications, but he's somebody who is extremely knowledgeable about production details and script development and things like that. He's a walking mine of information. And he's known for his meticulous compilations of notes of things. So he's good pedigree, and he doesn't disappoint on this one. I've been a Callan fan for about 20 years now, and I was keen to get a definitive episode guide and details, and this was the one I chose.
It's by Network, who I know more for releasing
DVDs.
I didn't know Network did books.
No, neither do I. As far as I'm aware, it's the only Network book I've got. But yeah, like you, I didn't actually realise.
Next to that, you have a book about a TV series that my mum mentioned randomly in one of our chats. There's a book about El Dorado, the TV show from the early 90s.
It was given to me by Keith Musselwhite, who at the time of El Dorado went out was still one of my bestest friends. But he and I were very close around that time that El Dorado came out. He was still is a huge fan of the BBC's output, and if anything like El Dorado came along, he was extremely loyal to, sort of trying out new things. So. And I think he liked the look of it. And there was, we talked a lot about El Dorado. And we thought,
so it only ran for about a year, didn't it? Almost exactly, yeah.
It was, I think, I satirised this a bit in my film One More Bow, in that it was doing the very un-British thing of kind of promising sexy and Sunday. It was basically I feel this and Trainer were the BBC trying to still do the glam soaps of the 80s, which the Americans were doing in the 80s, but was old hat by the 90s. So, and sooner or later, all the critics came out to maul it because of there were some inexperienced actors and the storylines or whatever. They didn't have a lot of time for it, and I think the BBC Suits got wind of this, and they cancelled it.
I think the ratings by then the ratings were going up.
The ratings were quite healthy.
It was filmed in Spain, and I think it was filmed in a town called Mijas. I think it was Mijas. It was in an area of Spain that my parents and I used to have. We used to have family holidays, so I kind of knew.
And the standing set is still there. You can book holidays in it.
I don't remember what month it finished.
It was July to July.
So Sutton Park came along.
That's right. It was. Sutton Park was born halfway through its run.
Yeah, I wasn't.
But you were at university by the time, because you started in '92, didn't you?
Yes.
University. So it was already. You were coming to the end of your first year.
Yeah.
When it's finished, but Keith and I had this. I don't know whether. I know he still likes it to this day, but I if it was still on, I'd probably still give it a shot.
I think my mum mentioned. I'm sure my mum mentioned quite liking it, or talking. We were talking about something.
I thought it was.
But I don't remember her watching it, to be honest.
It's, some of the acting was a bit, but you don't let that bother you if you're following an ongoing story. There's always something to it. And we followed it, and my parents followed it. I used to watch it with my parents, and Keith and I we just talk about it a lot. And he and I had a bet together that we could. To see how many episodes we could tape before we got bored of just taping them, and we did. He outstripped me on that front because he went right to the end, but I think if I'm not very much mistaken, I could be wrong about this. I think he's actually credited in that book. Who wrote that? And Robert Sturman. But I think he's certainly credited in the Verity Lambert book, which I got. But he was. He and I talked about it a lot. We used to joke about it, and we were both young, lusty bucks, and any of the watchable women on that we used to enjoy. And I have happy memories of it because I was probably in my first serious relationship at the time. In fact, I almost married her, and we were used to watch El Dorado together, and so it represents a happy period, even though it was a very troubled time for the Beeb. But I quite liked reading. I rather liked that book. I'll quickly mention, just between Limbo Connection and Callan there, a book I actually got from my parents' house after my mum died. I actually gave that to my mum in 1981. I think it might have been Easter, as an Easter present. Art Afterpieces. It's an American comic who's taken great masterpieces of artwork and sort of adapted them and sort of put flies on the end of people's noses and kind of had the old lady sat in the chair and had her watching telly, and there's all sorts of rather fun things. And there's a sketch of somebody painting somebody, and they're doing a silly childish picture of them. It's quite a funny, silly little book that I bought from Paperback Parade. Yes, I thought I always quite liked the look of it, so I took it on after Mum died.
Then there are two books by the actor Michael Sheard.
Three. That's the yellow one.
I wasn't sure.
It's faded a bit. I don't think it was very.
Is the third one that we're in?
The third one is the one that we're in. Yes, Michael Sheard was a prolific film and TV actor who we had the great privilege to meet a few times in the late 90s, early noughties. He died in 2005, and he did a series of books about his career. By the third one, he was asking for contributions from fans, and both Paul and I contributed. There's actually a picture of Chobi and Lisa from the archives, who became quite close to him.
Yeah, there's yes, Mr. Bronson, yes, Admiral. What's the
Admiral Ozzy or Oswald? He plays. It's basically an obscure. Sorry, I'm just arm wrestling my beanbag here. It's basically the character he played in The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, are they both? Those are both those two most
definitely autobiographies. Yeah, and so is the third one. Now, the third one, obviously, he gets more.
Do you think we should read out? Do you think we should read out what we contributed?
Yes, why not? Why not, indeed.
What was that one called?
Was it. Yes, School's Out. Now, because it's a yellow lettering on a orange lettering on a yellow background.
Yeah.
It's faded a bit.
Yeah.
I haven't actually got my reading glasses, but let's have a little look. Because I think I tell a general commentary. But there's loads of fans there. But I don't. As I say, we met him many times, and he was dance. You know, we see him as looking quite old in some of the shows, and yet he's. You know, he was there at Battlefield with us, which he mentioned here, and he was dancing with us, and he danced us. Let me see.
Mine's at the start of a chapter.
Nick Goodman here. Yeah, Nick Goodman, Salisbury, Wiltshire. Approaching the guests 1 and 2. Approaching the guests 2-1. I think that I'm not quite sure what I mean. I don't want your autograph. I just want to chat. I would think as I ask for another autograph. What can one do? Try wit if you can. The thought though I eating a twilight snack sat just before Colin Baker's signing session at the first convention. This is really what I call having your tea in front of Doctor Who. Avoid questions like what your favourite story, which I used on our author. He answered correctly. Michael is a gifted communicator. John Woodnut too. He once halted an autograph queue when he obliged with a one-man Doctor Who episode complete with music and effects. Faced with charity, I didn't mind the other. Did I mind the other guests on the table had gone? Hurrah for the communicators. But yes, that was the book where we made our Michael Shear breakout. It's my theory, though, that I don't know, but I think he obviously died of cancer, and I think he had a hunch he wasn't very well for some time, which is why he really did throw himself into conventions and gave himself to the fans in the last years of his life. And like in a way I've seldom seen, and he did make mention of having a blood pressure problem or something like that, which is I don't know, I'm speculating, but he really did.
Oh, here we go.
Pull it out of the hat.
I didn't realise I'd written. I thought it was just quite a small bit. Well, it's not long, but it's longer. It's longer than I thought it was. I'm at the start of chapter 7. Paul Chandler, Woking, Surrey. That's not changed. As an A-level student, I think I suddenly matured and began feeling sorry for teachers. In the 1990s at conventions, I began to feel sorry for the guests. It's a terrible shame that as fans of Doctor Who, many of us end up asking some of the most mind-numbingly stupid and boring questions imaginable when faced with our favourite actors. Questions that we probably already know the answer to. It's as if we just want a live-action replay of what we've already read. Unfortunately, a good convention guest can be addictive, can make you laugh harder than an episode of Fawlty Towers, and so you end up coming back for more, only to utter those immortal words. Sylvester, what was your favourite monster? It's a bit like one of the bits that you wrote as well.
It was
one of those recurring things.
I have a feeling we were told, not by Michael, but by somebody, that he was only looking for 100 words, and so I only wrote a little bit. And I think when we saw him, he sort of went, no, go for it. But it was a nice thing to be remembered. I don't think that book. I think it was out there only for a short time after he died. I don't think there was another. I don't think it went to print again. But it's just nice to be read.
I probably have a couple of copies myself. Following that, on the shelf, we've got Deadly Dangerous Tomorrow. Is that?
It is Michael again, and this time, I was extremely excited with this. it came out 10 years ago at the same time as the original Prophets of Doom, and it's the scripts. I think it's about 5 or 6 scripts of Doomwatch that are from episodes that don't exist anymore. And one of which is Fire and Brimstone, which is particularly one I was interested in, which is the character Ridge kind of goes mad at it. And it's been much read, because I'm always interested in missing episodes of things, and I really enjoyed reading them. I think I hope, I know that it's some hope, but I hope that they'll resurface one day, and they'll put them out there, because it was a great series, and Michael Seeley does it the best justice possible. You know, he does a great job on it.
Now, next to that, what's the 007 Diaries?
007 Diaries, yes, that it was given to me by Andy a couple of birthdays ago. That's our friend Andy Ching.
Been on the show.
Yeah, he's been. He and I are both Bond fans, and Live and Let. It's Roger Moore's diaries during the making of Live and Let Die. It's absolutely fascinating, because you don't realise how long the shoot was. They start in the sort of autumn of 72, and they're still making it well into 73. It's interesting to see the dynamics of the actors and what happens, and the kind of the days off and things like that. It's a blow by blow account, and it's significant because Live and Let Die was the first Bond film I ever saw. My mum took me to see it at the cinema. In 73, I think. Though we in those days we seemed to go to the cinema every other week. You know, it must have been a lot cheaper than it is now. So
next to that, you have another book about Dad's Army. Is this about the series more?
It is, yeah. That was presented to me by Sally, the director of Dad's Army. I did on stage in 2019 at Studio Theatre. I played a combination of 2 characters, because they're having trouble casting. I played I can't remember their names now, but it was the guy who was played by Tavrin Thomas, the goofy Welsh actor, and a combination of him and Private Sponge, I think. It wasn't a good combination, because it certainly wasn't scripted that way, but because one was pro Mannering and one was anti Mannering. So I'm sort of I was kind of buttering him up in one scene and slagging him off in the next. So it didn't really work, the combination of the characters. But I enjoyed being part of it, even though I'm a little contemptuous of TV shows becoming plays. You know, I think it's a bit like celebrations, you know. No, that's just a small Mars bar. Why don't you be your own chocolate, you know? And again, maybe I'm just too rigid in my thinking, but it's a super book. Again, I like behind the scenes things, learning about the actors, learning out how they got the part, learning what they were like and what their background was, you know, and it delivers in spades, that book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was a present from the director.
The next 3 books, at least, I think we've done on the podcast, Blake Seven books. I think we did them in one of our book club episodes.
That's right. The Blake Seven, the novelisation, is just called Blake Seven. I bought when Series 1 was still going out in 1978, again, Paperback Parade. There's a very odd picture of the Liberator because it was a telescopic-looking thing. It was shot at various angles, and you wonder if it was actually upside down or not. And for years, my vision had it upside down, but I think it's actually just on one side, coming towards you. But the Blake Seven programme guide was something I picked up at W.H. Smith in Christmas '82, and having remembered the show from day one, it was the first reference that you got of the whole series. And Blake Seven Monthly, which was a publication at the time, plundered this ruthlessly when they did their own storyline, and it was quite clearly they were stealing it word for word, but they changing a few words so it didn't look too obvious. And even some of the inaccuracies that they got Animals and Headhunter of the last series round the wrong way, and the Monthly had it round the wrong way, and so they had it in production order rather than transmission order. But it's a good book. Some of its interpretation of things is a bit weird. Tony Attwood, who wrote it, went on to write a story about what happened after the big shootout at the end wasn't very good, and I don't think it's very well considered. But I prefer Tony Attwood as a sort of episode guide. And the third one, Project Avalon, which is a novelisation of 3 of the Series 4 episodes.
So we've got the Assassination Run and the Assassination Game. Were they TV shows?
Yes. Now, Jack Gearson, who was the writer on both Assassination Run and the Treachery Game, was the previous year had adapted Running Blind, but Desmond Bagley, which I had watched on the there was I've always liked spy thrillers and things like that, and I thoroughly enjoyed with that. So when I heard there was another Jack Gearson thriller coming up, not only was I delighted about that because it was in the same slot, the New Year-ish, I was even more delighted to learn that the Doctor Who girl Mary Tam was playing the wife in it. And the Treachery Game took up the same characters from Assassination Run and gave them another story, and I loved both of them. I think I saw Assassination Run twice on its first 2 transmissions. Treachery Game, I remember I only dipped into it patchily because by that time I was at secondary school and I had homework and goodness knows what. But I would love to see those and Running Blind out on DVD. I don't know if they've got copyright problems or something, but that really is screaming out for release. I'd love to see those too. They're cracking stories.
Now, coming towards the end of the episode, but I think we've got time for a few more. We've got... is that a Callan novelisation?
Yes, that's a Red Father Callan is the novelisation of Magnum Skryder, which is the first ever episode. So it's a novelisation expanding the first. I haven't actually got around to reading that yet, but we picked it up at in a jumble sale or jump shop or something, and I thought, oh yeah, that's quite.
We've got Carrie by Stephen King.
It is. I have to say, the only Stephen King book I've actually read from cover to cover.
One of the shorter ones.
The shorter one. I read. Yeah, I was interested in Carrie before I even saw it, and the subject of bullying and things like that. I kind of was. I'm sort of any kind of anti-bullying message. I'm all there, and I enjoyed reading it. It's a bit more graphic than the movie, but I do love the movie very much. And but I actually, this is one of the rare occasions I actually read the book before I saw the movie. I read the book in '82. I didn't see the movie until a year after.
Yeah, I probably didn't read it that long after. Now there's a Joyce Grenfell Request the Pleasure.
Yes,
is that like anecdotes?
I have a feeling it's her autobiography.
Oh right.
But again, that's Alice Moore. The Joy. I quite like her. We're watching a DVD of her TV shows at the moment. But I quite like her. But Ali's the fan, so that's very much an Ali book.
She was very British, sort of. It seems wrong to say like the Victoria Wood of her day, but
well, she was. Yeah. I think she was very much Victoria Wood because she was. She had that kind of. She didn't really need anybody else on the show. She was talented enough with characters and everything to do it herself, not like Vicky Wood. But also, I have to say, watching the telly shows that she did. If you stick a pair of glasses on her, you've got my aunt, my aunt, Auntie Wynne. Who would have only been about 12 years younger than her, and my dad's sister, who was quite.
I think I can remember isn't the one where she's like telling off a child for being inappropriate at the dinner table or something.
George, don't do that.
Yeah. It's very
they're quite
British.
Fun. They're quite fun.
I think I've got a DVD at home somewhere. Then we've got 1 or 2 books that are based on other armchair thriller. There's a Patricia Highsmith.
Yeah, Dog's Ransom. That was adapted into a 6-parter for Armchair Thriller, the second story. And what's interesting is it's set in America. It's an American story, and John Bowen, who adapted it for Britain, and I think he did a very good job. I know our friend Phil doesn't think so, but I think he got the essence of it right down to, and the characters, did a fine job. And I think actually he, when he gets onto the Dog, the police get onto the Dog Nabber, it's a lot more logical in the adaptation than in the book. In the book, he just goes from house to house and house and house, and you think the chances of him finding it. Whereas on the telly, his girlfriend actually illicitly tips him off.
I don't remember if we discussed the books in the book club, but we discussed Armchair Thriller on Around the Archives, and the books did come in a bit in that for sure.
Yeah. I'm between copies of Chelsea Murders at the moment.
Oh yeah,
which is, I know, your favourite.
I got a copy, but I think it was in one of my. I have an awful habit of, when I was going to work regularly, having a rucksack and putting more and more into the rucksack until the rucksack gets too unmanageable, and then getting a new rucksack and just putting the old rucksack in a cupboard somewhere, and then coming. And I have a feeling that one of my copies my copy of Chelsea Murder, the novel, was kind of was in. It was stuck in. I think it survived, but not ideal though. Then. The world's greatest Hollywood scandals. Is that Ali?
That's a super. But no, it was given to me by Ali as a sort of, because she knows I like sort of showbiz stories and anecdotes and things like that. It's a wonderfully pithily written book about the various scandals of the more the sort of early Hollywood days, and it's got a wonderful tone of phrase. Especially when it talks at length about the McCarthy witch hunt in the 50s, where Joe McCarthy was saying that such and such is a communist sympathiser, and the whole thing blew up into a witch hunt. And it says about how there's a bit I'd like to read actually, because there's a wonderful. I hope I haven't already done this bit, but there's a wonderful bit on how it all came apart for him. But McCarthy, as I say, McCarthy witch hunt is something that is very much part of history.
Small print. It
is small print, yes. That's its only disadvantage, but it's written so zappily and amusing that I must admit it's looked very thumbed. And because in the days when I actually had time to read in my lunch hour, it was. Yeah, there we go. McCarthy's bullying inquiries lasted until April 1954, when the American people finally grew weary of him. It would be cheering to think that an overwhelming revulsion swept him away, but the truth is that McCarthy was one of the first great casualties of overexposure on television. People simply grew bored with him. I love that. It's full of lovely little... The way he phrases things is marvellous, and
the book next to it, Brain Rack by Kit Pedler and Jerry Davis, who are associated with Doctor Who and creating the Cybermen. What's Brain Rack?
Brain Rack is one of their, in the 70s, because of course they also did Doomwatch together, and that was given to me by Alan Hayes. It's actually their original novel about I think it's about a radiation wave that sort of affects people's intellect. I haven't actually read it yet, but it's one of about 3 original novels that they wrote in the 70s. But I think it was one of those that I think at least one of them was up for an option for a film, but which never materialised. But it's a sci-fi adventure. I must read it sometime.
Intriguing. I say we're running out of time, but I'll probably pick a couple more, then say goodbye, and then we'll talk about a couple more after the end credits. But Dear Blue Peter, I think I've dipped into this one. Isn't this written about sort of behind the scenes and stuff?
It's actually all the letters written to Blue Peter over the years. Again, this was a present years ago. But yeah, it's a nice little compilation of all the letters, all the quirky letters that Blue Peter have had over the years.
I think I'm thinking of a different, because I think there's a biography about Blue Peter, sort of from behind the scenes of one of the producers. But for those of you who don't know Blue Peter, it was a sort of children's magazine programme that ran still runs to this day, although not on BBC One anymore. But
the other book I'm actually on going back to the top shelf very briefly, My Tolpuddle, which was all about the Tolpuddle Martyrs rally. I actually am in that I've got a section in that, and Ali's got a picture in that. Her first one was in 1975 when she was a baby, and there's a picture of her at her first Tol Paddle rally printed in there, and there's a section I wrote where I'm talking about my first Tol Paddle, having gone to it, and sort of, I suppose I was in my late 30s when I went to my first one. So, but that's another example of publication.
Now, dropping down to the bottom shelf, there's a book by somebody who has been on this show. It's a book all about Tenko. I can't remember the full title, and I can't read
Remembering
it.
Tenko.
Remembering Tenko by Andy Priestner, who, well, he's on many podcasts, but he did talk to us about music last year, and will hopefully be back again soon.
I can't remember. I think I might have seen this book advertised on Facebook. I think yes. Yeah, because I think we just got the complete set of Tenko. Because for a while it was difficult to get the whole lot. And I watched Tenko. I think I don't think I ever missed an episode of Tenko. I was on 81 to 85, and it's one of those programs we watch religiously as a family. And he does a super job. It's an in-depth episode guides, how the whole thing was done, interviews with loads and loads of people. Even though when I met Burt Quark, he seemed to think he wasn't in it because people thought he was dead. But there is a contribution from Burt Quark, so I don't quite know why he thought that. But no, well done, Andy. It's great.
Andy and Martin Holmes, also of this, a regular contributor to this show, did a very good episode or series of episodes about Tenko and about they did on their A to Z of TV drama, but because Andy knew many of the cast from writing the book, he was able to do some additional episodes with interviews, which really added to the initial episode on the show, which they chose because it was
I have to say, not only is it one of the best shows I think that Eve ever did, but I certainly it's easily the best war drama they ever did, because it's a real emotional roller coaster, and the hardship of war. It's probably the one production that shows the hardship of war more than anything else.
Well, I think it's a good place to leave this, although there's no hiding the fact we'll be back again briefly after the we always do that. The listeners know we do that, but
it's like the encore, isn't it? Oh, thank you very much, I really must go. Hey, I'm back again.
But anyway, Nick, thanks for sharing some of the books in your collection.
Pleasure.
And a slightly different way of doing a book club episode, because it kind of we get to cover a lot more books and all quite diverse, whereas we tended to group them when we did our book club shows or have some theme. It's quite interesting also to do quite the opposite and just kind of look at it like you've walked into the room and they're there on the shelf. But anyway, well, we'll be back again soon, listeners. In fact, we'll be back very soon, in about 30 seconds. But anyway, we got plenty of episodes in the can. We'll be presenting one of those within days. So anyway, thanks again, Nick. And bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, Nick, there's a book about the Tomorrow People that you mentioned to me earlier. Is it Jaunt, it's called.
Jaunt, yes, unofficial guide to the Tomorrow People. I've been looking as with all these series. The series I love. I like to read more about them, and yes, this was one that was coming out. It's quite nicely done. I would have liked a bit more detail, but it's not up to the Tenko and the Prophets of Doom standard. But I think it's trying to do something a little lighter and a little better. It's got interviews with Roger Price, who created the Tomorrow People, wrote most of the stories, and its main selling point, as far as I'm concerned, is it's actually got the script of the unmade Series 9. So they only had 8 seasons because the show got cancelled. There was all sorts of strikes and everything, but the show got cancelled. And the Mystery Moon, the unmade, presumably 1979 or 80 season, is there in its entirety.
Yeah, because listeners again who may not know, Tomorrow People was a children's series, a sort of often described as ITV or Channel 3's sort of rival to Doctor Who, but it didn't rival it in that it wasn't ever on the same day, because Doctor Who was always on Saturdays back in then, and Tomorrow People was in the week, I presume.
Also, I think the effects. They expected to do Doctor Who on a sort of sitcom budget. I thought they had some. I thought the standing set they have for the lab, the Tomorrow People's lab, was excellent. And then it caught fire, and they built a bright, sunny one that looks like someone's villa in Spain, and completely spoilt any atmosphere. But it was meant to rival Doctor Who, but
it came back in the 90s for a few years, and then there wasn't there an American version quite recently that didn't last?
It kind of tried to get back to Price's original by having a version of Jedediah, who was the robot villain in the first one, but I felt it was too grim and too the characters were trying to be too gritty, and some of the key thing with the Tomorrow People is because of their special powers they couldn't kill anyone, and there was some Tomorrow People actually killing people. So I thought, no, you've completely it's disappeared down a funnel here, and we're not getting it. I might have given it another shot, but I thought they were being too grim and gritty, I think, for what it was. And the 90s ones I don't think were too bad. There's some silliness about it. I mean, the origin story, which was written by Roger Price, ironically is the silliest of them all. I mean, it's 5 episodes and mostly pointless running around, and a sort of the concept of the military using the Tomorrow People's powers have been done so much better and so much more crisply in the original series. But Christian Smith of Neighbours fame was a very likeable lead, and in fact one of the Tomorrow People of the 90s has gone on to be Miss Moneypenny in Bond. Naomi Harris, she was, and she worked with. There was an episode with Christopher Lee, so she's actually worked with a Bond villain before she was in Bond. The Christopher Lee episode, the Ramses connection, was easily the best because it took itself very seriously and had lots of adventure and danger, and although I do remember Andy Ching spitting blood when it went out, because he was just preparing an Egyptian story of his own, which we filmed as Child of Anubis. But this, of course, it wasn't exactly the same, but it had some parallels, and I think it was.
We've also got is that a book on the Wicker Man?
Yes, it is. Yes, you got me into the Wicker Man, actually. In fact, I discovered Edward Woodward in the same year, about 20 years ago, and you lent me. Did you lend me the Wicker Man? I can't remember.
I did have it.
I have a feeling I watched it with you. Ali and I watched it with you, and I thought, this is good, and bought our own copy. Have we? Yes, it's over there. We've got a copy.
I've had a number of copies.
And there's this book again. I'm keen on behind the scenes stuff, and this is written by an aficionado with lots of interviews of the cast. many of whom are no longer with us, including the writer who's no longer with us. And it's a great book, and it's got lots of good pictures in it as well.
Goodbye, 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 goodbye.
This show is part of the Pride 48 network. Find more shows over at pride48.com.
Oh dear, what's going on now? Oh, it's the Shy Life Podcast.
Let's go.
I have a voice. I have a voice.
You have a voice.
You have a voice. We have a voice.
We have a voice.
Unique voices in podcasting.
UnivazPods.net.
Is that an autobiography or biography on Gene Wilder?
I think it's an autobiography. Again, it's an alley book. So I like Gene Wilder, but I maybe not have thought of going out and buying his book. But that's definitely alley.
And you've got
that autobiography. Yeah, he was still with us.
I take it the David Essex book is also alley.
Oh, most definitely. Yes, I don't think I'd. One of which is original. Fiction, is regional fiction from it. I don't think that's an autobiography. I think that's actually a book.
We have talked about David Essex relatively recently on the podcast when we covered 74, maybe, or 73, maybe.
Yeah.
On the music episodes.
I think Cubby Broccoli, I have to say, that and Michael Caine's autobiography, which I think is down there somewhere, is, I think, one of the most enjoyable autobiography, two of the most enjoyable autobiographies I've ever read, because they're wonderful rags to riches stories, and they're both thoroughly entertaining. They've got the laugh out loud moments.
And you mentioned Christopher Lee, and there's his an autobiography or biography.
I like Christopher Lee again, though. That's Ali's book. That book was republished as with a reference to his Star Wars appearances, but Ali wasn't terribly impressed with that and referred to as it was, tall, dark, and gruesome. That's one I'd like to read at some point, though, because I do like him.
So, if you were going to have to take 5 books from that, I haven't given you any warning of this. If you were going to have to take 5 of those books, what would you take?
Right. I take the English hymnal, which I haven't mentioned. Michael's Prophets of Doom book.
Yeah, about Doomwatch.
I'm going to provisionally say Cubby and Michael Caine's books. That leaves me with only that.
Maybe you should take Brain Rack because you've not read it yet.
It might be a bit. I'm going to like it, but and shall I take that one with us in it? I think I possibly might.
Yes.
That's off the top of my head. That would probably be.
Well, that's good. I won't be asking you to do that, so you don't have to worry. But anyway, nice.
Actually, I might possibly substitute.
Usually.
Actually, I might possibly substitute the Michael book for Sided with Rosie, which I've got.
Although Desert Island Disc often allows you to have a religious text, so you might get that one for free. So
I might, but then there's also there's a number of old Bibles that belong to both my parents, my Auntie Dorothy and my father-in-law. So I might take one of those with me. But as I say, that it's a tricky one. That. Just one more thing. Woody Allen's Complete Prose. I think Ali, it was yourself or Ali gave it to me. I can't remember, but I remember being very impressed. I've read that all the way through, and I remember that his written prose are actually even funnier than his films. They really are good.
Yeah, I'd probably have that as my Bible. That'd be that'd be my version of a Bible.
Yeah, I mean, I if it's extended to 10, that would probably be. Yeah. But no, I do like his prose. I think they're very good.
Oh my goodness, I can't wait to hear where in the world Paul the Shayette is recording from today. It could be anywhere.
Oh yeah, that's perfectly normal on the Shy Life podcast. Perfectly normal.
I don't know, but sometimes this show is really weird.
511. 511.
Oh, kitty, kitty, kitty. Purr, kitty, kitty, kitty. Oh, I love Dee Dee. This is just the weirdest thing I've ever heard.